recognize the Shell logo, at least being in the UK. Shell is still a brand. You won't know Wijnpaal Slovak, nor pronounce them. Yep. Which were developed at the same time, to adding a brand new one much later. So we added mobile phone contracts. It looks similar to this, but it's not this. So we had issues with, essentially, in order to save time, we have to copy and paste components and then just tweak the logic and tweak the provider names and the display names and everything, because we just don't have time to take a step back. We didn't have the specifications for telco when we were building electricity and gas, because there was at least 6 to 9 months between those processes. But essentially now, I've got a legacy CSS code base. I have a code base where I'm not 100% sure everything needs to be there in order for everything to work. It's very difficult for me to do dead code analysis on all of this CSS. So yeah, and it's also reaching the point where we're onboarding people onto the team. That's another problem with CSS in general. If one of your developers, one person on the team, is fantastic at CSS, then they feel a sense of ownership over it. They feel that they want to review every change that goes in. They want to understand fully the system that they're building. And that's great, but as soon as they go on holiday for a week, all of a sudden those exclamation mark important tags come in and everyone goes home early that day. So yeah, we've been a startup in Berlin. I've not really seen much of the Leeds tech scene. I worked in Sheffield for a couple of years. There's kind of quite a mix of massive companies in Sheffield with small offices there and tiny design agencies. But in Berlin, startups rule the world, and startups pivot and tweak and change, and your specifications are only as good as long as the paper on them is still on someone's desk. So we've had to tweak, we've had to change, we've had to kind of add in little bits here and there, and it's the all too present want and the urge to just hack this little thing in. It's Friday at 4:30 and 5 o'clock is beer time. Let's go, it's fine. And yeah, so we've come to a certain point. We've reached a crossroads. We completely go back, try and maintain the CSS that we have right now, and try and bring all the hacks out. Bring all those weird, just put a margin left of -2 rem on it and it'll totally look perfect, I swear. Those kind of hacks. You want to bring them out, you want to do it the right way. But that obviously takes time for absolutely no benefit. So, yeah. And we also want to start integrating a pattern library or style guide and start building that. That's quite difficult with legacy CSS because all of a sudden you don't know whether that component that you built that JavaScript-wise is wonderful. The JavaScript for that component, you can drop it anywhere and it always works. It's the best component ever. And then you look at the CSS file because all of your CSS is imported in one place. And you look at the CSS file and all of a sudden there's nesting, there's everything, and you suddenly realize why on mobile at this breakpoint, when you turn the phone that way, that way, that way, that way, and that way, all of a sudden everything goes, completely wrong. And I think there's really a fundamental thing with building CSS in a component-oriented way, is that learning CSS is hard. I really don't think, especially at, in JavaScript meetups, like I love React, love JavaScript, love doing everything that I can in JavaScript, but really at the crux of the matter is that CSS is really tricky. CSS, if you keep CSS around in a code base for years, it is almost impossible to remove it. It's very difficult to test. You cannot unit test your CSS. All you can say is that when I render this class is applied. And that's wonderful. That tells you that your classes are being applied. doesn't really help you if that class has a parent class that changes its behavior. So that's very difficult to control. It's very difficult to understand. It's very difficult to bring somebody new into an existing legacy CSS code base. So yeah, I essentially we've reached this point as a team. We've gotten to the crossroads, and I want to use the hip, new, trendy React styling libraries, right? I deserve to play about with making components, from nothing with weird template literals and everything. But I still want to write CSS because at the end of the day, worst case scenario, if I can just copy and paste the declaration into the new component and I gain some benefit, then it works. It's legacy, but we understand it. We can test it. We know exactly what's being applied at any given time in JavaScript land. And I think the real crux of CSS is the C. It's the cascade, right? The style sheets are actually quite easy. You've got the declaration, the selector, some curly braces, some semicolons, and then it all works. You say, this class should have font weight bold. Cool. Now it has bold font weight. Perfect. Job done. But once you've got a file full of it, importing 40 other files, suddenly that gets really difficult to manage because you're not actually sure what you have available to you. And yeah, as soon as you want to reuse a component, as soon as you want to drop, do the lovely React, I'll just throw that component onto a completely different page. You figure out, oh, it doesn't have that data. Okay, I'll go and get that data. You hook it all up in JavaScript land, and all of a sudden it doesn't work. It works perfectly according to React and according to Redux. It's rendered, it's there, it has the data, the store is correct. You can click buttons and it works, but those buttons are over here when they should be over here. And it's just generally quite difficult, and especially keeping class names up to date. So we have a checkout progress class in CSS, or we had until I changed it. And I wanted to reuse that because it has nothing to do with checkout. It takes some steps, some arbitrary number of steps, and sets out the labels for those steps and the number for the thing. But when I originally did it, before I thought, oh, hang on a minute, I can fix that, it was called checkout process. And I moved it into something that wasn't a checkout. I don't know whether everyone's asleep because of pizza, but I was expecting at least something. But yeah, so React components and JavaScript components, Angular directives, these are all quite easy to think about. But they're very difficult to think about when you have to bind some internal knowledge of the CSS to what you're looking at. So everything from forms to buttons to just little bits of text that need to look a certain way. They need to be all caps all the time. Whenever you see them, the little tiny little gray footnote, for example. So the problem that I'm trying to answer right now, and hopefully this talk will help you get some information and might help you try to answer similar things, is how we can take a different approach to changing the look and feel of components while keeping our code base maintainable for people who were not there the first time the CSS was written, that they're blindly copying and pasting classes. So we can break our stateful containers from stateless components in a React app. We can take all of the logic, all of the state, all of the API calls, all of everything into the containers. Make sure the containers know what they're doing, know where they are, know what data they need, and render pure components. You'll get a lot of render performance benefits. And that's all well and good in JavaScript land, but how do you compose CSS? How do you say, I want all the things from this container passed through into this component? You either do some horrific nesting of your CSS, that's legit, it works, and this is, I think, part of the problem with CSS. Most often, it works. It'll look horrible, but it totally works. It will accomplish what you want. So you're thinking, okay, you know what? This is nonsense. This is some JavaScript kiddie coming up here and telling me that CSS is terrible, and it's not. It's not. But the problem with BEM or SMACs, actually, first those two, is that they're convention. There is absolutely nothing stopping you from writing a non-BEM class name. Sure, you can lint for it and you can hope, But it's very easy to turn off the linter, to disable it for this one line, because you know better than that damn computer. And which is the Inverted Triangle Css, which, as we're in Leeds, you probably have heard of quite a few times from Harry Roberts. This is an organizational system. And as it turns out, in an organizational system, you can put whatever CSS you want, wherever it is, as long as it looks about right, file name-wise. Technically. You shouldn't. And proponents of these will tell you that you shouldn't. And full disclosure, we're currently on these two at work. I don't hate CSS. I love CSS. I want ways of making CSS more approachable for me and my team. So, let's take some CSS. I have to stand over here and make sure I'm not waving this way. So we have a class name, color tomato, import it, or use a link with a rel tag, render an h1 with class name hello. Red hello will appear on the screen. Everybody's happy. Let's have beer. So what this particular thing is assuming is that Webpack knows how to parse CSS, which it can fairly straightforwardly. But it uses a side effect of Webpack's loading process. It doesn't actually import anything from style CSS. It just imports it. It just loads it. The CSS gets loaded. In our case, this is behind the scenes using extract chunk Webpack plugin, or extract chunk text Webpack extract chunk text. Extract text. I think we've got another 3 chunk plugins because Webpack. So it's using a side effect of that to then create that linked rel style sheet equals here. Here's the bundle of your CSS, everything hunky-dory. But what happens if you want to reuse that in another place? You want to make something else red. Do you just call it class name? Class name equals class name? You might want to change the name of it. Feel free to substitute in your own name. That's why I chose class name. Because I'm pretty sure, I'm looking around the room, everybody's either looking at it going, I know what class that is in my code base. That button red, which is blue, because we attach lots of semantic meaning to class names, to classes, to what we call our CSS. Why? We've got the component. The component has a name. Each component that you render has a name, even if it's a DOM tag, just some HTML. Name the things that you need to name. Don't worry about naming things that you don't need to name. So, yeah, this is what these things try to solve. They try to give you easy answers. So if you're working on the stereotypical card component with an avatar and the username, the first name and the last name and the username or the email address or whatever, they'll say use card _ avatar. And if you want to make it round, it's avatar -- round. Job done. And that's an easy answer. But I think why is it an easy answer and why is it needed? It's needed so that you have some idea of what you're looking at or what your component should look like. So at that point, you then have to look at the HTML, figure out if there's any weird nesting in the CSS, and if your CSS looks like your HTML, that's also a bad sign. So you have to figure out if there's nesting, if there's anything weird going on in your CSS. You've then got to look at your HTML. You've got to figure out which class is on which element. What happens if I put card _ avatar onto the email address? Does it work? Probably not. Because you're adding semantics to CSS. You're adding semantics to class names. You're ascribing value to them. But you know what's really good at ascribing values to things? Computers. That's what they do. That's how they reference everything. So the first thing that I'm going to talk to you about is something you may or may not have heard about. Kind of went around big last year, which is CSS Modules. I know I said last year in JavaScript terms. That's centuries ago. But it is a very, very useful stepping stone. And this is kind of where I'm thinking our journey will begin. In the search for composable components as CSS files. So the beauty of it is you write in real CSS files. You can use whatever CSS your CSS processing thing supports. There's absolutely no change. You just change how you import that CSS. So under the hood, there's a whole deal with Interoperable Css, which allows you to do locally scoped styles. I'll not get into that. I did do another talk on it. If you just Google my name at the end, you will see a full talk on that. But essentially, this is the magic. This import statement is side effect free, comparably. It's side effect only for the side effect that you were explicitly asking for. You're either saying, give me the class name, or give me all the styles and then use styles.classname. But give me the class name as an object, or as a key from the object that you export. So all of a sudden, you know exactly what class name you get every time. No semantics, no nothing. You import class name, you've got class name. You can call it whatever you want, it doesn't matter. You can even rename it in the JavaScript and have the CSS catch up later, especially if you're using style. So that's pretty cool. But then, like that's pretty cool, and that's something that you can essentially you add question mark modules onto Webpack CSS loader and it just works. But that's kind of boring. What are you doing now? You're just importing some CSS sometimes, not all of the CSS all the time. So this is where composition comes in really handy. So the usual example is the button, and you want all primary buttons should inherit from button, but not all buttons should be green, for example. So here I tried to keep it simple because I didn't know what the scale of the room would be, and also I didn't know essentially I didn't know how far away you'd be. So we've got the class name with color, tomato, background color, papaya whip, and then we have another class name which composes class name. This is the new syntax, and changes the color to Dodger blue. So then if you render it with another class name, that hello is blue on a kind of papaya whip background. And if you render it with just class name, it's tomato with papaya whip. Job done. Compositional classes, no messing about, no nothing, just, hey, this gives me everything from this class name. I can override whatever I need to. Now, again, you might be looking at me and thinking, Lewis, Sass has this. We've got extends. What are you talking about? Why do I need this fancy new thing? Well, because that is a good point. Given this is the first time I've given this talk, I should add this big article link to why extends is a terrible idea. Essentially, the crux of the matter is look at the CSS that it outputs. It does not output pretty CSS. This outputs that CSS and then overrides anything at the time that you change it. That's it. No messing about, no funny business. But yes, so thank you for reminding me, all people who are now looking mildly confused. So, yeah, this is a really good stepping stone. You start seeing patterns in your code. You start seeing where maybe there's some JavaScript or some props in your React land components that are changing the color of something or changing some style prop somewhere. And that's where one of the creators of CSS Modules helped create another thing, which is fun. Styled components. And yes, the nail polish is, I believe, officially part of the name. As far as I can tell, this is it. This is the best way right now to modularize your CSS completely. You still get to write CSS. You don't write it in a CSS file. You basically, as you write your components, you get a pattern library for free that you can chuck into Storybook or etc. Just render it, just go. It's fine. Perfect. So if you've not seen the syntax for the API before, or you've not seen a feature in ES 2015, I believe, called tagged template literals, then it might look a bit weird. But it does feel quite nice once you use it. So this would be a styled component. So take styled from style components. I like showing the imports because I feel like sometimes people show a lot of code and what you're missing is the 17 things that allow you to do that code. But yeah, so just styled. Give it a tag name, and then this is a backtick. It doesn't show up too well, but it is honestly a backtick. And it gives you color tomato. So that will parse every CSS that you can throw at it, including and :hover, add, I believe still adding pseudo elements works. You can add as much CSS as you can into there, and it will still work. But the beauty of it is, at the end of it, you get a React component. And that's pretty cool. You now have a styling solution that doesn't care what your CSS file structure looks like or what it's called. It gets a generated class name at runtime, similar to Css Modules. That's how they do it. They generate unique hashes based on location of the file and the directory that it's in to generate class names for you. This does a similar thing. So your CSS winds up only loading what is needed on the page because your JavaScript knows what CSS is needed to load every component. So, yeah, so you're thinking, okay, this is kind of cool, but what if I want to change, what if I want some buttons to be primary and some buttons not to be? It's JavaScript. Just throw in some JavaScript as a tag template, literal. You'll get props in here. You can check props.primary, make it tomato, make it Dodger blue. You can do if you can come out with a string at the end of it that looks like CSS, it'll work. So now your title is primary, it's tomato, not Dodger blue, etc. So for me, this is a game changer. This allows every benefit that I can think of any JavaScript and CSS solution, because it actually allows CSS. It doesn't allow something that looks a bit like CSS. It allows a string of CSS. You can lay it out with new lines and everything. You can just copy and paste block from class into block from component. You get a React component out, not a side effect. And props, yeah, I'll come back to that after because I have way more time than I thought I was going to have. So yeah, now you can change the style of your components, and the output is another component. You can even save title as primary, with primary as the default prop as primary title. Job done. You didn't even need to write any new CSS. You only said, give me a component, render a component with a specific set of props. Job done. So this allows way better dead code elimination because you can tell your Uglify.js can tell that you're not using a component, strip it. Job done. No unnecessary CSS, no massive CSS bundle that you use 4 classes of on the main page, nothing. Everything just works. So, some conclusions that I'll draw just now. You might not need it. Honestly, I've worked with a fantastic CSS developer. I started this project with a fantastic CSS developer. At the time, I never questioned why I would need it. I kind of thought, yeah, it might be cool to try, but we're not really hitting any problems. Now, as the project grew, our fantastic CSS developer moved on. I believe he might be watching the live stream as well. He moved on, and we kind of suddenly, slowly, it's just the thing is that I think the thing with CSS is you don't notice it because your tests don't fail. Nothing happens. Nothing will one morning say it's broken. Everything is terrible. But it just becomes more and more difficult to add new CSS, to remove CSS that you think that you don't need, but maybe you've generated this class name somehow in JavaScript. And it starts getting really confusing. So I'd say, yeah, try out CSS Modules. Just play with it for a bit. I'm not saying you'll love it, but it is essentially CSS with a different import. And you're all good. If you want to play about with some React, if you've either done it professionally for years or you've never touched it, style components is a quite nice way of just getting React rendering things quite quickly. Yeah, keep your eyes out for fun, cool new stuff, like TypeScript. Like, you might like it. So, thank you. Feel free to tweet at me, Lewis Cowper. I now realize that putting my Twitter username in the footer did not help, because nobody can see it. So, a small bonus round because I've got, what I guess. Yep, cool. So, if you can style theme from style props, style components from props, this is like React tongue twister, maybe you can also build themes in React. And it turns out there is a thing for that called style theming. So these two are different files. So you can have mode dark. So Twitter releases their night mode. They could have done it like this. They probably didn't, but they could have done it like this. So then when you're building your box, you create box background color, and then when you're actually instantiating the style component, you use that there. So you can pull in the global theme from the theme provider, which works in a similar way to Redux, passes everything down that you want it to the store, to the app, and define, okay, for mode light, make it white, for mode dark, make it black. For size large, increase padding. You can also do some super fun things like offer a reduced animations mode, where you basically just cut all of your animations for a variety of reasons, or you want to run lightweight mode, and you want to just ignore half of the fancy CSS and the beautiful images that you've got. You're just like display none, load it on a tiny connection, it's all fine. But yeah, so this is what happens when somebody comes along and tries to put CSS in your JavaScript, essentially. Thanks. Oh yeah, you can do questions, I guess. I think I'm assuming the social is basically just stay here. Okay. Do I have to stay here?
Yeah, you got.
Do I have to wear the microphone?
You got another 15 minutes.
Okay. Let's have fun. So yeah, any questions? Anything? And do you want to? I don't know. Do you want to see how it looks or how it works? Yeah.
Like, what does that actually compile out to?
Yep, cool. This is the one that I should have prepared earlier and didn't. So let me just pull up Webpack bin. Let me mirror displays. So CSS modules wise. Oh, come on. Why do I want to start with TypeScript? I would. So yeah, let's start with from React, import React DOM. That's all capitals. Broadly, while I'm typing, I know 100% for sure CSS modules creates its classes based on a hash of the file that you're putting the CSS in and the directory that it's in. And it uses that hash to, and then attaches a unique hash to each class name. I believe that style components does exactly the same thing. So let's see. If anybody has any other questions, then feel free to, shout. Can I just pull render there? Anyone got anything else? Yeah, should go to just go typo equals. So is everyone now just watching in case I make a typo? That's the usual fun. So let's just take. I don't know if I can put a semicolon in there, or if I should or not. Interesting. What do I have in here? No ID. Okay. So root. And render title. No, I need to give it actual thing. Document get element by ID root. No. Should I just? What have I done wrong? I don't even have types to save me. Why not? Anyone? I can't honestly remember. I started a React project from scratch. Anyone? It's not a trick question, I swear. Why?
Looks like it's complaining about the
Yeah, no, I think that's just Webpack bin, because it's only on character 16. Have I saved it? 10.7. That's good, it's getting sooner. Sure, it's somewhere. Call render with a component and an ID and a HTML element. Job done. Pourquoi? Hold on. I'll Google it. Anybody got anything else? Just while I unmirror so you can't see my shame. Oh, unless, of course, maybe. Ooh, that's a point. It might not even be incorrect syntax. It might be the package doesn't exist. Okay. Anyone? Sorry, I should have been looking for hands. That was really silly of me. Anyone, or are we just gonna?
With CSS modules, how would you then organize the project? Would you treat
So I would do the same thing that is now as of not that long ago being recommended, where everything that affects some component should be with that component. So I would put the component.js, component.test.js, component.css. And then also you get the added benefit of just importing from the directory that you're in. And you always know that if you import styles.css from the directory, you never need to worry about, oh, is it component.block.styles or something? You never need to worry about that. You just use the folder as your, oh, this is the thing.
So then how does it work then if you want to share styles between the components? So you have 5 components.
Yeah.
All use a primary button.
So your 5 components that use a primary button should be importing the button as a component for one, and that button as a component would import its styles, and then each 5 of them would just take the component as output, and they would already have the class name. So yeah, anything else? Well, I think I've got it. So styled components actually uses Glamorous under the hood, which is quite neat. There's also, if you want a really tiny version of the styled components API, let me unmirror. You can also use CXS, which as of a while ago, come on. Okay, literally NPM is currently running in my browser. Give me a moment. Yeah, CXS, which is not the config server exploit scanner. Don't know what that is. Yeah, so by default, CXS will output class names that are unique based on the object that you provide them, so you can set up your things as objects, which is all right. I think that's kind of for the people who want to do CSS in their JavaScript but don't really like CSS, they like JavaScript. So they want to write objects. Very difficult to do hover styles. Like all of them have to. So the media queries become objects with the key as the thing, and that's kind of weird. But they have. Where is it? Yeah, they have a very similar API to style components that's accessible with. And it looks more like JavaScript. There's none of that tag template literal thing. It's just call this function, curry it with an object, job done. So yeah, let's see. Is it doing anything? Oh, it's because I need to say. I hate tab controls that don't work. That's frustrating. That should work. Yeah. So, 61 already? So yeah, you get a styled components prefixed class name to make that. So that's what that looks like. If it hadn't taken me so long to get the styled components demo, I would do the CSS Modules demo. Unless they got a boilerplate for it, they might have a boilerplate for it. No. Okay. But yeah. So that's what it looks like. It's the styled components prefixed class with a random hash. And I believe, definitely in CSS Modules, the class names were customizable. So you could, in fact, have emojis as your class names, because it turns out there's a lot of them. So your entire website could just be, once you built it, just all class names were emojis, which makes your dev tools look brilliant. I should say. So yeah. Yep. So I think from my research into it, in our specific case, I think we'll use CSS modules to pull the page styles out, so that each page can render child components in all of them. So that should make the path easier. But yeah, in general, we want to write as little HTML directly as possible, because it becomes very difficult to keep track of which classes are on which H1s in which place. So we'd quite like to just say, okay, header, level 1, so that will render an H1 versus an H2 to 6, and yeah, primary will be our black, and this kind of thing. So I think the styled components will come in at the same time as CSS modules, and very slowly the balance will shift of like kind of what height we're starting from, because style components is super easy for like, hey, I want all of my paragraph tags by default to have no margin 0, but margin bottom 0, because you know you're copy and pasting, you're just putting something together, and all of a sudden your margins are all messed up because you're using a paragraph tag for a single sentence, and you know got lots of things. So you want some that have a default. Okay, just give me a no margin p tag, give me my p tag, and then you can use that. Whereas CSS modules is really helpful for going from the top level and saying this page needs all of these styles. Maybe we can try and get them out and start pulling them in specifically, so that we can then try and get a better understanding of which styles are actually needed to be custom classes versus which styles could be replaced with styled components with just, okay, you know what, it's a p tag with margin bottom 0 on it, cool, done. We can just drop in a component directly there. So yeah, I think it's, I definitely could foresee a situation in which they coexist. For example, global styles, so stuff that you actually do want to have global. You've got an animation. They like all of style components and CSS modules, and obviously regular CSS will be able to do global CSS. I can show you that actually as well. You can definitely see what I was Googling just before I came up here. Yeah, so they actually have a really nice looking way for it to do it. Where the hell is it? Oh, come on. But yeah, anything else while I'm loading pages? Or are you just like itching for social? I can feel literal tension in the room. It's like, yeah. Server render, I think any of the solutions, so JavaScript turned off, will still get you the right CSS out and the right HTML out. Sorry. I just opened it. So, oh yeah, here's the keyframes animation. So they'll offer handlers for lots of global stuff. And where was it? I just saw it. Under advanced service area, yeah. Yeah, so I still haven't really wrapped my head around what goes on the internals of how React actually server-side renders. But I believe, yeah, this sheet.collect styles will go through and figure out which components are being loaded, which styles it needs to inject, and this kind of thing. But yeah. All of it is possible with JavaScript turned off, especially the CSS modules, because that's literally just imports. Like, the generation is done at build time. Once it's built and deployed, the world's your oyster. Anything else? Yep. Couldn't tell you, to be honest. I know there's like, I think a guy in Australia who built it, a guy in Austria who was speaking at ReactCon Europe, JSCon EU about styled components, Max. But I don't know if they've got like a branding page or something where, hey, all these people are using it. I have seen tweets, but I did not think honestly to bookmark them and have an accurate number for this question. But I do know there are now. I've seen Max retweeting, hey, we just onboarded styled components for this story at the New York Times or something like that. So yeah, it's. I think because Glenn Maddern, wherever he is on here. Yeah, there we go. That's what I was missing. I was looking at the documentation site. But yeah, Glenn worked on CSS modules originally with a few other people. And Max met Glenn, and then all of a sudden they were like, yeah, CSS modules is great, but wouldn't it be great if we could just output components? And they iterated a lot on the API and tried to make it as easy but as flexible and powerful as it needed to be. Because there's more of the API that I haven't shown you, like styled-components.com, and you'll get all kinds of fun things that, yeah, I really like. But yeah, 443,000 downloads a month. It's not that bad. And the Eurovision Song Contest, which as somebody who lives in Berlin, I can tell you, in Europe, that's a big deal. We did not care about it whatsoever, but in Berlin, it's like an event. Streets are closed and everything. It's a nightmare. Yeah. Anything else? Oh. Cool. Thank you. Prize draw time. Woo! Oh, I should have entered that. I'll leave it on for now. Okay. They'll probably be stacking on it now. It's fine. That's not it. That's it. So 19 entries, which I think is more than last month. James Wardby. So come and see me after this. I'll